Okay, I can see a thumbs up. Perfect. Thank you. So welcome to the AU Core Technical Design Group meeting. This is the AU Core main call. And this is on a Tuesdays. We're part of the Trans-Tasman Symposium that's going on over 3 days from the 18th to the 20th of March. So this is at a different time than we usually are. And I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country and that we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all gather today, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And we acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators and healers. I'd like to advise people both online and in the room that photographs and videos will be taken during this event. There are at different times, if you're here in person, some vox pops that will be going on and you might be invited to participate in that. And if you don't wish to be photographed or videoed, if you can speak to HL7 staff. If you don't know who that is, you can also approach me and I'll connect you to Emma, who's the HL7 person who's looking after this event, to make sure that your image isn't either captured in the photos or videos. As always, we record our meetings. What we're doing is open standards work at a national level, and it's quite critical for our process that we capture the minutes of what's happening, including the attendees, and that also includes the recordings where possible. And today it is possible. Thank you very much from Microsoft for providing us this office. And so we'll be capturing that. So if that's something you're not capable of or happy to participate in, please exit the meeting now. Otherwise, your attendance and participation will be recorded. So this is a hybrid meeting. So judging from the number of people online, I'd say the majority of people are in person, but there's also a significant online cohort. We'd like as much as possible. And in fact, if I can ask one of the in-room people to shut that door so that we don't impact the next room, we'd like as much as possible for this to be a one-room experience. So in that case, we're asking people both online and in the room to raise your hand. Obviously, in room, that will be a physical raising of hand, but online, that will be using the Teams to do so. If you've dialed in or called in, I suppose, and you aren't using a Teams app, you can say your name instead and just indicate that you would like to participate in a conversation. And in that case, the chair or facilitator, and I'm chairing the meeting today, I'm Danielle Tavares-Rickson, who is the Sparked lead in the Fire Sense, will call out your name to let you know that it is your time to speak. We'll be undertaking some decisions today, at least minutes approval, if not some more things. There's certainly AU Core Dosage rules that is proposed to be voted on today. And we're going to do that using Menti. We don't always do it, but whenever we do hybrid meetings, we use Menti. You can get prepared by going to menti.com and entering in that code if you want. There will be a QR code coming up. So for those of you online or in the room, get your laptops ready, get your phones ready. This is what we're going to be doing, and we'll go through a practice motion very soon. I'll also ask that when you're speaking, can you say your name to let people know who's talking? Online, that will actually probably be really evident for the people in the room because your icon will come up. But for those people in the room, for the online participants, they might not know who you are. So if you can, please remember to say your name and then tell people either the question or discussion point. That would be really handy. I'll also warn for the people online that the chat's not going to be monitored. So if you've got a question, if you've got something you want to participate, please raise your hand so that everyone can see that and join in the conversation. And we'll call on you and have that facilitated across both the in-room and online experience. So I just wanted to cover off really quickly because we've got a couple of new people, which is fantastic, that whenever we go through decision making for a HL7 standard, there's a process to this. And overall, we follow Robert's rules. But what that really means is when we're making decisions, it's really important to capture a formal motion, which is to say, what is actually the decision that is being discussed? And we want to know who's put that forward. We want a seconder. And then we go through a majority vote, which today we'll go through Menti. So at certain decision points, and we're about to do a practice one shortly, we will have someone motion a certain thing. The chair, who is me, will ask if there's anyone willing to second that. And then if there is, we'll call if there are any other discussion or comments on that or questions prior to moving to vote. And if not, we'll move to a vote. We'll go through majority to vote to determine the outcome of that, whether or not the motion passes or whether or not the motion fails. Which brings us to the practice. So if everybody could go to that, and although I'm not allowed to, but let's just say for this point, I would like to motion a practice motion. And Michael Osborne has seconded. The people online might not be able to hear that. We'll have a microphone in the room. Are there any questions or comments before we move to a vote? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Let's go to the Menti. And so we can see here that this is what that looks like. Please select affirmative, negative, or abstain. I see that says the words abstain approach, which is just me being sloppy. Sorry, that's copy paste error. Affirmative if you approve the motion, negative if you are against the motion, and abstain if you do not want to vote either for or against, which may be for a number of reasons. Maybe you were either not present or it's not something that you feel ready to make a decision on, or it's not something that you think is something that you care about. It's not something that will impact your product, your organization, your system, and therefore you have no concern about whether the outcome is for or against. And I'm just looking at the votes. We've got 20 people who've voted. Let me count the tally. How many people are online in total?
21.
Okay, so great. We've got that. It seems like the practice motion has passed. How wonderfully proactive and cooperative of us. Let's move back. So that's how this is going to go today. So coming back to this then. So this is the overall work group meeting agenda. We're now in the AU Core Technical Design Group. So this is the AU Core main call. The fire work group has already happened, and we'll give you some updates on what that is as it affects the AU Core group. And then after lunch, we'll find the AU Core Patient Summary Project call. Will be present. We might see you online for that. We might not. That will also be recorded and made available. And apologies, I just went the wrong direction. Okay, so our agenda for today. So we're going to go through our usual business and updates. Our usual business will be approval of minutes of the last meeting. That's been sent round for review. We'll give any updates and news. Then we're going to get to the main business, which is looking at the proposal for the introduction of rules on conformance around dosage, both in a medication statement and intermedication request in AU Core. Steve will be looking after that. We've allotted around 50 minutes. And then after that, we're going to go through, and we'll probably actually allow more than 10 minutes for that. That's probably going to be more about 20 minutes to go through what's coming up in our next meetings and also talk through the Connectathon. What's going to be looked at in testing, where are we with testing now, and restarting that from an AU Core perspective, and going into the agenda for our next meeting. But first up, as always, is usual business. So the first thing we want to look at is approval of minutes of the last meeting. Now, these were emailed around for review. There's no outstanding requests for updates from this, and I'm about to go through that. I might make that bigger for the people who are relying on that. So these are the minutes of our last meeting, which we actually covered quite a lot, to be honest. This meeting is where we went through both a report back from our Adelaide face-to-face and also went through the medication statement proposal. So the minutes have who attended. We've got, of course, the slide pack. We've got the recording of that. We've got the minutes walking through all of this content, including the number of decisions we made around medication statement, which I'd also like to update for people that these are now applied. So our last meeting, which was almost 2 weeks ago, was going through AU Core medication statement proposal. And it was going through that in enough time that we could then make that available to Connectathon. So we went through and did that. And that has actually been included into the AU Core snapshot. That's why you can see the word applied here, which indicates that the current version of the AU Core IG has applied that approved change request. So everything that we agreed from the last meeting is already applied into the current version of the AU Core IG, and we'll start to go through testing tomorrow. Very exciting. So we've got all of that content. You can see here again a whole number of decisions we made around the interactions, around the different search requirements. They're all in there. So I have to ask, does anybody need more time to review these minutes before we move to approve them? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Would anyone like to motion approval of the minutes of the last call? Stephen's happy to motion and Landon will second. Are there any other questions or comments while we go to the vote? I'm not seeing anyone. So please vote for approval of the last set of minutes. For those of you who haven't yet joined Menti, I'm just going to put the QR code up there. I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we'll take those numbers for the minutes. So that's 10 affirmative, 0 negative, 14 abstain. That motion is passed. The minutes are approved. And we'll go back to the slides. Right, other updates for today. So we've got no specific actions coming out of the previous minutes, but in terms of updates, so the AU Core R2 PSS, which is the project scope statement, was submitted to the fire work group for discussion and approval in its most recent work group meeting, which was like 40 minutes ago. And that has been approved. How wonderful. So the agreed scope for R2 that we've been working through our different scoping workshops has now been approved by the fire work group to proceed, and that will now go to the board to ratify for AU Core R2, which is to say that we have agreement that we will move through to publish a 12-monthly maintenance release. So we'll go through and publish in January 2026. Which puts our working standard ballot in the August to September ballot cycle. That we will incorporate the medication statement related person, and that they're happy for our focus to be the downstream projects, AU CDI, and also, I've forgotten the third bit. Damn it. Is it downstream projects, AU CDI, and the enhancement of existing R1 content through testing of connectathon maturation and the backlog, like working through the JIRAs and community proposals. So that's now been approved. So that will go to the board to be deliberated at the next board meeting, to be ratified and endorsed. And I'll come back to you guys to confirm it is endorsed, or if they have if they've made a different decision and why, which is very unlikely, but always possible depending on whatever the board considerations are at the time. I've got the bullet point there for other updates because that's a good question. Brett, is there anything else we need to update the AU Core TDG at this point in time? Wearing your HL7AU board member hat. Okay, that's a shaken head. So no, there are no additional updates from the HL7AU board at this time, so we can move on. Thanks, Brett. Okay, there's a couple of things I just wanted to go through in terms of updates. So there's two things that have come out. There's some Zulip polls. So I want to highlight here, before I go through the Zulip polls, for those who are joining us who are relatively new, when you indicate your interest in a fire project, we send you an email and we go, hey, look here, there's all these sorts of things to join. And one of these is chat.fire.org. I cannot stress how important it is that you're on that. That's the community chat where we talk about who's implementing what, and that is driving what we're actually implementing and deciding on in our fire IGs. And so we've already done that with dosage. We did that through medication statement. And there's two new ones out there that I want to highlight here. One of which is healthcare service. So if you are on the fortnightly call, basically 2 weeks ago, the agency has proposed through the community proposal mechanism that I was just talking about to say that for their Health Connect program, they would like to propose to have a AU Core healthcare service profile be introduced into AU Core R2. And as part of doing the work on that, they've put out a poll, a Zulip poll, which is another name for chat.fire.org, to understand who is using healthcare service, what are they using? So I'll go to that now so that you can see that. It's actually really quite short. So I would really ask everybody here to be, well, okay, that's going to take a while for some reason. I would ask everyone to contribute to that. So the poll is really quite short. It's a set of multiple choice questions. I think you guys can see that now on, is healthcare service something that's relevant to you? If you've adopted it, what's your use case? And there's also the capacity there to add additional. Obviously, the agency is proposing it from their Health Connect perspective. But what's really important for us to understand from a core perspective is what else is out there. And there's also a couple of other really short questions which will inform the initial proposal that the agency will bring to this group, the AU Core TDG main call in April, to propose what should go into AU Core R2. So it would be really great if everybody on this call or in this room was able to respond to that poll to help inform whether you're using it, whether it's relevant to you. If it is relevant to you, why? What are you using it for? What would you use it for? Any questions about this before I move on to the other poll? Because I realise that this isn't something that we've done a great deal of in the past. All right, I'm not seeing any hands up online. I'm not seeing any hands up in the room. So the other thing I'll show then, so that's healthcare service, and that's really, really relevant to AU Core R2. The next one is coverage, and I am raising it in this group because the coverage resource, although it's not proposed for R2, keeps coming up. It's certainly in the AU Core backlog. And it's in AU Base and it's in the AU Core backlog, and e-requesting is working through coverage. And I think to a certain degree coverage in the sense that it describes insurance information, whether that's Medicare, DVA, private health insurance, public funding or otherwise, is a really key part of describing the healthcare interactions. So I would very much expect this to come up at some point in AU Core. If it's not R2, it might be R3. If it's not R3, it'll be R4. And I think for those people who are implementing, this is going to be relevant to you. So it would be really great if you are aware of the fact that these requests for information are going on now from e-requesting and AU basis perspective, and to be providing your contributions into that so that you're also helping shape what that is. Can we have
Heath Prankle. So AU, the FAR working group is seeking this for AU-based purpose. Given that there's no mass supports and stuff, what's the interest in these elements? Like, what are we working out?
From an AU Core perspective or from a firework group perspective?
Well, my understanding was it was the working group that was actually seeking information. So is the working group seeking information on behalf of the TDG or?
No, so there's an AU-based coverage profile and it's at draft 0. And it's at draft 0 because there's only 1 or 2 elements of the coverage resource that have been localized, and where we don't have sufficient evidence to indicate to us that the usage of coverage information in Australia is actually sufficiently addressed in terms of AU base. So this one, which AU base has identifier information, it has type, is asking for information on when people are implementing coverage or intend to implement coverage, which elements do you actually use?
All right, so just to see whether we need to localize the types and terminologies and things like that. That's the main purpose at this point.
I think it's to assess beyond that. So far, we've had some really good discussions, and the previous polls, which I think are even above this, have got some really strong evidence to say that the highest priority relating to coverage has been identifiers and types, and that the AU-based profile has done that. But we've never asked what else. And so for us to assess that, in fact, we've localized everything that needs to be localized, we need to check what else is out there. Is anyone implementing anything else? Are there other terminologies? Are there other identifiers? And possibly what's even more important is, are there other concepts which might even lead into extensions that people are needing in order to do their workflows that we've not addressed?
Just to be able to advance the FMM label. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So that's what this is about. It's about working out, what are people using when they're implementing. And so this one only has Magentis at the moment that's responded, but hopefully we get some other respondents to indicate which elements are being implemented, and also if there are any additional elements. Let me just double check that the question even poses that. Let's have a look. Yeah, there's a new option. So if, for example, when you implement coverage information in Fire and you find that you need an extension or something additional, you could use the new element option to state that. All right. Any other questions or comments about these polls that are out there for the Fire community at the moment? All right, let's go back to the slides. So that's those two. So it would be great if people were contributing to those. These links will be on the minutes, noting if you are already a part of chat.fire.org and have joined, it's under the Australia channel. These questions are being posed. And really, if you intend to be a continuing member, you really should sign up for that, because all sorts of interesting things are going to be continue to crop up every couple of weeks, basically questionnaires, links to different proposals, and announcements of different meetings and testing sites and all sorts of things. Which brings me to testing. Okay, so AU Core R2. So we're in R2 space now. And there's a couple of things happening. So we had the proposal back in December on what we were going to work on, and I just walked through what that proposal was, and it's been approved by the Firework Group. We're going to be balloting for working standard in August. We're going to publish in January. But in between then, we're going to be working through a refinement and enhancement of our existing core content to address downstream needs and additional AU CDI coverage. And that also means that we need to look at continuing to test AU Core work. We had some really successful testing experiences last year, and testing includes connectathons. We've got those tomorrow. They happen 3 times a year. They're really amazing events, and I hope that everybody in person is going to stay with us over those few days, that have a huge number of different people there with tutorials and all sorts of like policy, and bring all sorts of conversations together. But what we also did for AU Core in particular is we had some dedicated testing events, where these were one-day events where people, especially people who maybe had never participated in the sparked like Fire experience before, or the Fire IDs who wanted to get to grips with what's involved, who could come along to a one-day event, be in person, connect with a number of implementers, have a whole number of people on site, and really actually do a hands-on experience. We got some really great feedback from last year that said that this was worth it and we should do it again. So, what is out now is an expression of interest. And that's not a commitment to participate in testing. What it is asking people if you're interested in us holding any future sparked events this year. Um, we're looking at should we do combined events where we're actually having a 1 day event in a city, be it Adelaide, be it Hobart, be it, I mean, I think there's probably an option for you to pick a place, Alice Springs, wherever, and indicate where you are, where you would like something to test, what week it's in, what you're interested in, and why. And that's what this is, so that we can gauge what's out there. Because the AU core content is really being driven by what the needs are and what the interest is. If there's no interest in doing testing events outside of connectathons, then we won't do them. If there is a lot of interest in holding these, where we're doing these and we're bringing in even smart forms or questionnaires or smart app launch and combining that with patient summary with e-requesting, then we will look to actually hold those in the cities where we've got majority interest. So that's what this is out there, is really just a tell us, are you interested? Do you want to participate? Where are you? Where do you want to be to test this and when? That's what this call is for. So if that's something you think you're interested in, please respond to that. This EOI is only open until the end of this week for us to actually start kind of trying to go out and assess what venues are out there and where we can be. Because certainly if people pick some remote areas of Australia, then, that takes some planning. So we're going to have to work through it. All right. So, moving out of our updates, we're now into the meat of today's meeting, which is the dosage proposal. And I'm going to hand over to Steve. Now, Steve, you're a Mac user. Do you need me to work the Windows machine for you, or will you cope?
I'll see how I go. Alrighty, thanks very much. I don't think I'll be changing teams, even though we are in the Microsoft building. All right, thanks. So yeah, we're working on the AU Core Dosage profile. So there was a ticket in the backlog that was deferred over from the R1 release. And so today we're going to be looking at the feedback that we've received over the past few weeks and also go through a proposal for a profile. So the aim of this is to consider the issues that have been raised, any feedback that we've received, and then look at endorsing some inclusions for AU Core R2, which will include an update to medication statement and medication request profiles, and will then mean that we can then go ahead and test that at the next Connectathon. And also will be part of the AU Core R2 ballot. So I mentioned the existing issue. I'll just open that up. If I click that, that's going to work, right, Danielle? Okay, awesome. Very good. Okay, so this was raised last year. So I was talking about the AU Core medication request and medication statement. Yes. Yeah, how's that? Yeah. That one? Oh. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay, so at the moment, medication request and medication statement, the dosage is indicated by the AU base dosage profile, but in order to include must supports, we would need to change that to be either a specific AU core profile for dosage or to inline some of the dosage elements directly onto the profiles so that then we can indicate them as must support. So as I mentioned, this was removed from R1 just due to time and scope limitations. So we're bringing it back for R2. Now, how do I get back to the slides? Is it Windows tab? Oh, Oh yeah, the lemon. There we go. Cool. I'm back. I can use a Windows computer. Okay, so that's actually what we're talking about. So we're talking about that particular Jira ticket and implementing that, and that's forming this proposal. So we did put out a poll. So Danielle mentioned the Zulip poll on dosage before, and we received, I think, about 9 participants giving us some feedback on that. And I'll get into that in just a moment. And we received a little bit of feedback on our Confluence page also. We looked at the IPS, the IPA, and the US core IGs on how they are treating dosage and the must support elements. And then we considered whether or not we needed to build a profile or just inline some of the content. This proposal is very light touch. I did do a dosage information session where I went through all of the elements last week. And essentially what we're going to be looking at is just flagging some of the elements, or at the moment just one element, with a must support obligation flag. So the poll results from Zulip. So these are all of the elements within dosage that we listed out for people to say, yes, I'm using these, or yes, I know I find these important. So the question was, which dosage concepts does your organization or product support? And you can see the results there. So a lot of people using text, a lot of people using timing and the as needed Boolean flag, and also the route flag, and a couple of others there. Additional instruction, some people using patient instruction, and then also dose quantity and things like that. So yeah. We do. Yeah, we have time.
I mean, we can look at, because we know some of the respondents, which is amazing because we've got some consistent participation from different products, right? So we know that Neil is MediRecords, Chris, I'm pretty sure, is Alcidian, and we've got Federica from Orion and Philip from Oracle. So we can kind of look at, and we've got Marika there, and Landon. So we can look at which kind of product types, I guess, are responding to which elements.
Yep.
Which I think is probably actually quite relevant to the conversation coming in, because you can clearly see there Marika and Landon, which is really in that primary care space, are the only ones who are looking at max dose period. And it's really interesting to know what is consistent across all the settings, because we've got the EMRs, I guess, in the primary healthcare system. So that's what I'm seeing from the respondents across like Neil and Chris and Federica and Philip and Marika and Landon, that some elements are clearly going across all healthcare settings.
Yep.
And then some elements are just for whether it's hospital, and then some elements are actually just showing up in primary care, which I think is actually really relevant coming into the AU Core setting, of course, because AU Core being that minimum set of requirements across all healthcare settings, that we need to sort of take that into account. So I'd like to actually comment, even though I know I'm sharing, that I think that doing this poll on Zulip, I think, has been really useful.
Yep.
And I think that's given me some indications that we'd like to continue this approach for future additions into AU Core and other work. Yeah, I've certainly found it enlightening looking at what people are using.
Sorry, Sanjeev here. Daniel, got a question.
Yep.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like for AU Core, when we were using Confluence page, if I remember, we were capturing against organizations such questions or such requests. Why aren't we doing it? I understand probably Zulip you feel is more convenient, but for me, till he pointed it out, I had no idea even that there was such a poll running in Zulip. Not everyone checks Zulip all the time, whereas if Confluence information gets shared over email, it's easier. And then we can also capture these responses against organizations rather than you having to go back and tally which person belongs to which organization.
Yeah, we did email it out a couple of times, the poll, because we were trying to push people to use this approach a bit more. The other approach that we had was a Confluence page, but it's a little bit tricky because you need to edit the page each time.
I might catch up with you, Sanjeev, to work out maybe a more targeted way that we can land on this. I think it's the eternal question of what makes it easy for people to respond to.
Yep.
And I know there's a lot of comms that come out and we want to make sure that they're targeted in the right way. So I'll try and find some time with you, Senji, because I think just double checking, you're not going to be at the Connectathon tomorrow, are you?
No, I'm not there, but Neil and Josh will be there.
All right. Well, I'll send you an email and we can maybe catch up like offline and get your feedback on what could be a improved approach for this.
Okay. Thanks, Daniel.
Okay, thanks. Would anyone else like to talk through any of the results here on the poll? No. Okay, so we'll move on. So, the other thing that we took into consideration was the comparison with other IGs. So, medication statement must support elements in IPS is text and timing. There's no US core profile for medication statement, and IPA has only text. For medication request, again, it's the same for IPS. So text and timing.
Down one, please. I need you to sit on your bed, please. On your mat.
It's all right. US core is text timing and dose quantity, and IPA again is only text. So we looked at each of those, and then we thought about whether or not we should be. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Question. I'll go back. Comment.
That's route. US core 8 has route added to that. It's CI. Conversation.
Yep.
Sorry, off mic, we were arguing, is 8 like a real thing yet? It's not real thing yet. It's CI build. So, and then we've got someone else desperately waving their hand over here. There's another mic there. We should put 2 in play. Of at the moment, US core official published, because that has its version, which is 700, doesn't have route, but the current indication is that US core is moving to include must support on route, though that's still to be confirmed through their ballot and so forth process.
I think we have to think about how requests are different than statements. And I think that even in the poll before, where I think it's kind of apparent there's a lot of content in statements based on prescribing. And I think in a core spec, we need to think about more general cases, as we don't have a prescribing or an actual detailed request requirement attached to core as such, right? So it's not an e-prescribing spec. So I think even what's happening in US core in request, we should look at it, but I don't think it's necessarily that we have to go along with it, because they have different concerns and different usage, right? So yeah, it was just to note that.
Yep.
I agree. It will be interesting to see what the difference is between statement and request, but picking up on your comment about this is not a prescribing spec, understand that, but we're still exchanging scripts, that historical scripts or even current active scripts. And so there's a use case that I'm aware of in particular that is where we want to exchange information so things can be re-prescribed in another system easily without transcription. And so having enough information to do that would be very useful.
Okay.
So replicating what Brett just said off microphone is it's a scope question. And I agree with that. Because as we're just seeing, US Core is moving in release 8 to moving to include route. We're on AU Core R2. And I think to an extent that we need to start as light as possible so that we don't overburden multiple use cases while arguing through what is that light as possible. Maybe that's route, maybe it's not, maybe it's timing, maybe it's not. And that's what we're going to do today. But I would, even though I'm chair, remind everybody that the first introduction of the requirement should be as light as we feel we could possibly go, right? And then we can add on. The opposite is a really dangerous place to be.
Okay. One more. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we look at the existing e-prescribing conformance profile, right? Like if we look at which fields are actually mandatory already in the conformance profile, that might be a good starting point, right? In this case, the root is mandatory.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is one use case. And I think the challenge for Core is that it needs to enable all the use cases while not prescribing them. So for every time you want to know about a medication, you don't always need that. Every time a patient says to someone, this is the medication I took, or there's something ordered, you don't always have that information available or required. And so it's the balance between AU Core saying across every single use case, no matter what use case it is, population health, patient directed, all those things, here's the minimum requirements, while not prohibiting anything that enables the specific use cases, which are prescribing, which might be medication administration, whether that's in a residential aged care or otherwise, to happen. And I think that is largely what we end up arguing about is, and also in AU CDI land, I guess that's where that core of the core comes in of what's always true, no matter what. I see Brett has found a microphone. Okay, yes.
Even I think, but even in the requesting space, there are different usages in requesting because you can have med charts which operate a certain way in aged care. You can have hospital med charts which are a certain way in hospital. There's requirements for e-prescribing, which bring in things like identifiers and other things that you need to have to do e-prescribing. So like it's not even that there's one answer for medication request. And I think when we're talking about statement, that's an even more general sort of concept again. So like I don't think it's I don't think we can necessarily overload the requesting requirements onto statement automatically because it's unless we decide to opt into things. So like, and to his point, like like I know absolutely people would like to take a statement and be able to prescribe out of it, but that requires enough information to make a valid script. What is a valid script, right? Because we don't have a spec. We have a e-requesting spec that's separate, not in HL7 Australia, or gone through a committee. So, but it's so I'm not even sure we have a definition of what that is. Yeah.
I was going to shut up so that Steve can move along, but I can't. My concern. I'll shut up for now. Let's move on. Okay, final comment. Completely agree. E-requesting is out of scope, right? We need that, but we also need to be able for receiving systems to ingest this data.
Well, e-requesting might need to use dosage if you're talking about some instruction as to some okay, that's fine then. Yep.
My point was there are enough core use cases around ingestion. Like there's two sides of it. We don't want to just display data.
Time. Right. We have 35 minutes left in this meeting. It has been wonderful. But let's time box and go back to the slides so that we can attach our comments or feedback more to the specific items of the proposal rather than generics before we even get to the proposal.
Okay, so I think this is the last thing that we considered is around whether or not we should be building a full profile or just inlining the elements. So, okay, you don't move on. Okay, that's right. No worries. I can talk about that later if you're interested. Our use cases for dosage that were important was around prescribing and lots of, current meds and prescribing.
Can I just ask, did anybody comment on pathology tests? Because that's one of the ones that stands out for me as not being an obvious pure meds case. Do we have... Oh, yeah, please.
So particularly in hospital medicine, there's a requirement for reporting, say, antibiotic results with dosage. So that's a common use case in a hospital.
Okay.
And sorry, just in that case, because if the use case is pathology test, is that like pre-test or post-test?
It would be supporting information on a request, and that would be reported out with that as an interpretation type thing.
Okay, great. Oh, yep.
Sorry, I think there was someone online with their hand up. Who was that? Would you like to comment?
Yes, Danielle, it was Rosemary Velado from SA Pathology. I was going to make the statement that certainly dosage is required for all of our toxicology resulting and all of our drug measurements. So there's quite often we give back the dosage in part of our report, our result.
And in that particular use case, what kind of information about dosage ends up being reported?
Last date and time of dose.
I'll find out.
Yeah. And dose itself. So dose, last date and last time given.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so now we're just going to move on to the actual proposal that's that we've designed. So as I said, it's a light touch. We're proposing for medication statement simply to add text as an inline element on the dosage element for medication statement. And so that would be populated if known and no error on the responder and requester side. Yeah, so I guess if there's any more discussion, or we could have a motion. Keith?
Okay, so at this point, there's a proposal that is open for community discussion.
Yep.
We've got a number of use cases that were highlighted in the previous slide. That includes both requesting for diagnostics. It includes reporting, as Rosemary has indicated. And we've also got patient summary, which has, as was indicated, I think, in the previous slides, must support on text and timing.
Yes.
And in terms of coming to agreement about what our first steps are, I think there's a couple of questions we need to put to the group. Are we going to have comments on this? But I'm particularly interested if there are any objections to text. I mean, this is what's implemented in the My Health record, and as far as I can tell, is really consistent everywhere. But I think it is really important to capture for the people online, given the use cases we have, if people are saying this is not what we should be supporting. Is there anyone who is in that camp who's saying no to dosage text? I'm not seeing anyone with their hands up online, and I'm not seeing anyone with their hands up in the room. So I think that is pretty safe, which I've got to admit is what I expected. That's consistent everywhere. As far as I can tell, every international fire spec, every CDA spec, every V2, everything has this element. So that doesn't surprise me, but we should always ask the question. So I guess the next step is, do we need to do anything more? And that's where we open that up to online and in the room of, as a first step, do we need to put support on more? I can see one hand up in the room, and that's Heath first. Please go ahead, Heath.
More of the thing on process, as far as motions, etc. Rather than just going as are we going to move to a motion for an entire proposal, or are we going to do one element by one element? And in which case I would like to move that we have text as an element in our dosage for medication statement and medication request.
The initial idea is that we might come to a block vote on profile by profile, so medication statement and then request. However, if there is a sufficient argument about the different elements within a particular profile, we can go element by element within a profile. Though I'm happy to support the motion, if there's a motion on the floor, of putting must support on text for medication statement.
I'm happy to move that we add text as must support in medication statement and medication request as a starting point.
All right, there's a motion from Heath to add must support in AU Core to dosage text in medication statement and medication request. Is there a seconder? I can see Brett has just raised his hand, so we have a seconder from Brett. Are there any questions or comments before we move to a Menti vote? It looks like no. So please vote for the support of dosage text in both medication statement and in medication request in AU Core.
No negatives.
Okay, so 14 people have voted, and frankly, that's not enough. We need more. Steve,
I think we did.
I see you're just standing there. Have you
Yep.
voted?
I have not voted.
I'm chair and I cannot vote. You can. Please do. Awesome. And that number is going up. That's 16. That's close. We need a couple more.
There's 17 votes. How many have we got online?
Okay, I'm going to count that down in 5,
Okay.
4, 3, 2, 1. We will take the numbers there. So, for the motion, which is for AU Core Medication Statement and AU Core Medication Request to have must support applied to dosage text, we have 14 affirmative, 0 negative, and 3 abstain. The motion passes. So we have our first set of must support rules around dosage. And frankly, I'm very excited about that. You might not look it for those people in the room who can see my face, but yes, no, it is very exciting. So the question is, in the time we have left, what else? Which elements do we need to talk about or argue about? There are people who are desperately waving their hands in the room. Is there anybody desperately waving their hand online? Do you want any other elements?
So, I think there's a number of elements that make sense, and I think if I think the difficulty is the variation in usage in different settings and in different systems. Text is here because most people could produce a text representation no matter what they did, and you can read it when it comes to you in a summary or something like that. I think all the other things you start like I think people could probably do route. People may be able to do timing or aspects of it. Consuming it is harder than producing it probably because you have to. I mean, your systems do certain things. GP systems work a certain way. They do similar things. Other systems do different things. So the question is like, at that atomic level, what is the value of exchanging it if no one can consume it properly? And it's, and I mean, there is some value in the sense that I do have a formal atomic representation that if people can consume it, they will. But I find it, if I include route, but don't include timing, I go, well, what's the point? And if I don't have dose and I include timing, I go, well, what's the point? Because I know when you take it, but I don't know how much in an atomic way, right? So it's kind of like, I think some of these things are missions, and like if I was looking at, say, GP system exchange, where I wanted to take something from one GP system to another GP system, I'm pretty sure we could define something that would work, but that's not necessarily the mission, right? So it's yeah, so I think there's a lot of scope there, and I don't know whether it should just live in more specific exchange IGs than AU Core. Yep.
Completely agree. And I'm very much in the ingestion side of things. I mean, yes, everyone can spit out text. That's easy. In fact, it's almost mandatory from the prescriber's perspective. Sorry, from the dispensing perspective, because that's all they care about is having something definitive to put on a bottle at their end. So text is great, but as I said before, I can't ingesting that text. It is fraught with danger. There's no way I can bring that into another system except display it. And I think we need to do a little bit better than that. And, you know, again, I might be generalizing here, but I think there's 3 or 4 fields that a lot of the primary care systems in particular atomize their data in. It may not be in quantities and things like that, but at least there is 4 bits of data that they are then concatenating to produce that text. And the question is, which is the priority one? And going back to the US Core, and also I would actually like to go back to the Zulip chat, because it's, for me, I was blown away with the ubiquitous responses that we got. And to me, I don't even see a difference between acute care or hospital care and primary care here. They're across the board. So route is 7, timing is 7, text is 7, as needed is 7. And I thought there was another one. Well, dose quantity is 4. So that one's problematic probably. But I think those that are up there on the 7s are pretty good candidates.
So to that extent, I would like to propose an action. I would like to propose that we accept the, and this is just an action, not a motion. We accept the current agreed dosage. We all agree it's text, and we think there's probably some more, right? And I also think that's likely, but I'm not 100% convinced. I'm 100% convinced about dosage text. So my action is that I would like to capture through the connectathon over the next 2 days which systems are doing what, basically, and we will report back on which systems are doing which bits of dosage, basically, to do a report back in the connectathon sense, on, because I know we've had some good response from this, but there's more systems that are coming to actually test than just this 8 or 9, right? And to go from there. So I'll take that action if people are okay with that, to investigate over the next 2 days across medication statement, medication request, and even where people are also doing administration and dispense, what is actually being captured across multiple systems, and report back into the next TDG, which for us is in roughly a fortnight, I guess, as part of the Connectathon report back around what happened, and include that. And so we can feed that into how ubiquitous was it that different systems were actually doing and using these different elements. Okay, for those people online, Heath said sounds like a good plan, and I think yay. So we will do that. I'll take that action on me. We'll report that back at the next call about what the actual usage is. So we'll agree it's at least text. We'll look at what the usage is as to whether or not we propose prior to ballot any additional must support requirements, noting also we'll have to look across our downstream, which is not a trivial exercise. From a downstream perspective, there are only two elements required from IPS. It's text and it's timing, and no more. So if we decide in Australian perspective something else is must support, we're placing requirements on top of IPS. That's not a problem if we have an evidentiary basis to say that's actually how we work. That's actually the requirements. But I think we need to come to that position. Yeah. Okay. Is there any other actions we need to take about this? I think we're at a otherwise fairly clear position.
Yeah, I think that's a good path forward. Yep. Okay. So I think last bit. So, which is you? Yeah, I can skip this bit. Yep.
Okay, so last bits, and what's next? How much time do I have? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? 15. Oh my God, so much time. Okay, reminder, EOI, if you're at all interested, you're an implementer, please fill this out so we can tell where and when you would be interested, or if you would or not. Okay, what's coming up? Connectathon tomorrow. That's obviously relevant to us in multiple ways, not just because I've taken that action to go track. Who's going to be there? What are they testing? There are other reasons for that. And part of that is that through the AU Core R2 work, and we have been incredibly productive, we've already added the AU Core related person profile and the AU Core medication statement profile. Those are being brought to the Connectathon and they're tested. We're going to go through and actually test them tomorrow and the next day. And then we're going to report back on, it's the 3rd of April call that we're going to report back what the outcomes were from taking this work we've already been working on, who was doing it, who's actually using related person, who's using medication statement, who's using dosage, what are those outcomes. So that's what the 3rd of April call is for. There's going to be a little bit, I think, in that call of a planning session to go, right, so we've hit our agreed major profile additions from December, which is a scoping workshop, the agency's proposed healthcare service, and we've also got some feedback from the Connectathon. And I think we're going to do some replanning in the 3rd of April to just check our course and go, where are we? What else do we need to work on? We're expecting, based on what the agency has advised, and what we've also got from community feedback already, who are kind of excited about healthcare service, that the work on healthcare service is going to be argued about in the 17th of April. So I'm roughly expecting that on the 3rd of April, we'll do a report back of Connectathon, which will include the breakout session of healthcare service and a whole bunch of things. The agency will announce a proposal of an AU Core healthcare service profile, which will hopefully be informed from people responding to the Zulip profile I showed you. Sorry, the Zulip poll. And that will come out for review for a couple of weeks. And then we will look in the 17th of April to vote on establishing an AU Core healthcare service profile. That's what that meeting's about. The following meeting, which is into May. So May is where we start going through the AU Core backlog. So if you've already created a JIRA, either through previous ballots, this is the point at which we're expecting you to advise us what you want on the agenda. If you haven't already created a JIRA, if there's something you want to work through, be that a new profile, be that a new element, be that a change to terminology, that's the point at which we're expecting any feedback to come in, and we're going through January, February, March, April, May, June. May and June, I'm sorry, I'm bad at months. May and June are the 2 months where we're working through the feedback from the community raised, whether that's new things, changes to existing things, removing things, that before we go to ballot in August. So that's what May and June are about. Please be prepared for that. And that is a please be prepared. If I need to start a meeting and go, right, who's created a JIRA? I will. I mean, yes, I've created JIRAs, but I will literally ask you guys, what do you want? The point here is to service the community. And that's our next set of meetings. No, that's fine. This is AU Core, not patient summary, which has a problem later on. Okay, tomorrow, Connectathon. Tomorrow's Connectathon. Tomorrow, we're actually going through and testing a whole bunch of things, and there's some breakouts. If you're joining us, there's some pretty exciting breakouts. The agency is going to work through sharing of patient summaries with the My Health Record. We're going to propose a set of things and also ask the community about how and where they want to respond to that. So if you're going to be here tomorrow and you're interested in either core or patient summary, I would really strongly recommend you come to that. There's also, if you're an implementer, continuing then through the Connectathon, and also a breakout around healthcare service where the agency will again provide their proposal in more detail around what they're thinking about Health Connect and about how that might work in the ecosystem. And also elicit from the people who are attending what their use cases are from a healthcare service perspective, which is, as far as I'm concerned, a semi-tangled set of concepts, I think. Is this an organization? Is this a location? Is this a provider? Is it something else, which we think it's maybe something else? How does a consumer interrogate a service? Like a consumer actually has something that they want to have done, or a provider wants to refer a patient to something. Where and how does a healthcare service play a role in that versus a location versus an organization versus a provider? And so there's some things we need to untangle there and have defined at a national level for this to work, which I think is going to be fascinating. I'm going to move through that. So next meeting is online. So we're going to come back, all the outcomes of Connectathon and testing, we're going to come back to that. We'll report on it. We'll go through approval of minutes. We'll also talk about daylight saving ends, and we need to reconfirm our meeting times. And we're going to go through our backlog at this point. The indication currently from the agency, although they're putting forward an AU Core profile, is that it's not next meeting, it's the one after. So it's the 17th of April, not the next one, that they would like to have that voted on. So our next meeting is going to be driven entirely from the community backlog around what changes need to be made in R2. Right, we're at the end. So from either online or in the room, are there any items in particular that you think need to be on the next agenda? If you don't have them decided now, you can email me or message. You can message me through Zulip, chat.fire.org, and indicate there's a particular JIRA or some topic that you would like to see on the next meeting agenda, and we will add that. All right. Unless anyone has any other comments or questions, we can end this meeting a tiny bit early. Seeing none, let's end that early, and thank you everyone for your participation. Great outcomes. We've got some updates around dosage. Thanks, everybody.